20 years in the same house, same front door, same crooked light switch in the hallway, same spot on the kitchen floor where the tile lifted in 2011, and you said you'd fix it. You didn't. You won't. And the thing nobody puts on a chart, that house isn't a house anymore. It's a piece of your nervous system. I'm Frank, and today we're going to talk about what 20 years in one address quietly does to a Gen X man. Because the data on this just got loud, and most of it points at you. Start with a number that should make you sit up. The typical American homeowner stayed in their house 12 years in 2025, nearly double what it was in 2006. In Los Angeles, the median tenure hit 20 years. 20, the longest stretch in the country. And when Redfin tried to explain why the country stopped moving, they pointed straight at two groups, baby boomers and Gen Xers aging in place, not stuck, not lazy, aging in place. That's the polite phrase for what we're actually going to dig into, because there are two things going on at the same time, and they're tangled. There's a system that locked the door behind you, and there's a psychology that grew up around being locked in. You don't notice either of them while it's happening. You just notice that one day your knees know the staircase better than they know any other staircase in the world, and the idea of waking up somewhere else feels physically wrong. The system first, because it's the part you can prove on paper. About 1 in 5 American homeowners with a mortgage is still sitting on a rate below 3%. Roughly 80% are below 6%, meaning the current market rate functions as a wall. Selling your house and buying a comparable one across town isn't a lateral move anymore. It's a tax on existing. There's a clean example floating around the policy world. Swapping a 2.9% mortgage for a 6.27% one on the same priced house cost you somewhere around $103,000 over the loan. $100,000 to live in a different bedroom. You don't make that call. You serve it. And the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia put a number on the behavior side of it. Their economists found that every single percentage point of rate lock-in cuts your probability of selling by 18%. 18. You don't even need to do the math. You can feel it in your friends. The guy you've known since the kids were in Little League, who said for years he was going to move closer to the lake. He's not moving. He ran the numbers, did the face, poured a drink, and the conversation was over. Bankrate ran a survey in 2025 and found that 54% of American homeowners said they would not feel comfortable selling at any mortgage rate. Any. More than half the country has effectively taken their house off the market in their own heads. And you're in there. Statistically, you may not have decided it consciously, but you've decided it. Now, before we go further, you might recognize yourself in some of this already, and you might be wondering why a stranger on the internet seems to know the layout of your garage. That's the angle here. The lock-in is also an identity story, and nobody talks about the second half. Here's where the psychology starts to bite. Environmental psychologists have been studying something called place attachment for about 40 years. The short version, the longer you live somewhere, the more your brain stops treating it as a location and starts treating it as a piece of you. Researchers call the deeper layer place identity. Your sense of who you are gets folded into the walls, the route to the grocery store, the particular angle of light in the kitchen in October. Studies on long-term residents, especially in single-family homes, show this rooted feeling gets so strong that older residents describe the neighborhood as an extension of themselves, a part of who they are. You think this is sentimental. It's measurable. The newest 2025 work in this area out of Frontiers in Psychology found that place attachment is the actual mechanism, the under-the-hood reason that older people develop a hard preference to stay put. It runs deeper than stubbornness or fear. 20 years of small daily routines have grown into a structure your identity now leans against. You move, and the structure goes with the house. You're walking into a stranger. This is where being a Gen X man specifically starts to matter. Because you didn't get here by accident. You got here through a very particular 25-year squeeze. At age 40, 64% of Gen Xers owned a home. Boomers at 40 were at 69%. That 5-point gap is the first time in American history a generation showed up to its prime buying years behind the one before it. A lot of Gen Xers bought close to the 2006 peak, watched the value tank in 2008, sat underwater for years, and finally, got their head above the line. So when you locked in a 3% refinance in 2020 or 2021, that was the first time the housing market hadn't been actively kicking you in the ribs in 15 years. You're not going to give that up. The house isn't the prize. Not getting kicked is the prize. So you stay 5 more years, 10 more, 20. And here's where it gets interesting, because staying does something to your social life that nobody warned you about. AARP put out a friendship study in 2025 that's worth sitting with for a second. Men over 50 are lonelier than women over 50. That part you might have guessed. The part you might not have guessed is that Gen X men report higher loneliness than boomer men. Younger, lonelier. 95% of men say friends are essential to a happy life. And yet the structures men use to maintain friendship as they age, work, kids' activities, the pickup game at the gym, those structures quietly dissolve in your 40s and 50s, and nothing automatically replaces them. Now connect that to the 20-year house. Watch what happens. When you stay in one place that long, your social network never has to refresh itself. You don't get the forced reset that a move provides. The new neighborhood, the new coffee shop, the awkward small talk with someone at the dog park who eventually becomes a person you actually know. You keep the same 5 guys you've had since 2004, which sounds beautiful, and it is. Until you notice that 2 of them moved away, 1 got divorced and went quiet, 1 had a health thing and stopped picking up, and the 5th one you mostly text on birthdays. The roster never updated. There was no mechanism to update it. The house gave you stability. The house also gave you a social network, frozen in 2007. And the wild part is, the place attachment research actually predicts this. The deeper you root into a single location, the more your identity rests on the existing relational map of that location. You're not motivated to build new ties because the old ties feel like the right ties. They are the right ties. They're just not enough ties. Quantity matters in friendship the same way it matters in a portfolio, and yours got concentrated. This is the part where I should pause for a second. Before I keep going, I've been working on something on the side, a book called Psychology of Gen X. It gets into a lot of this. The stuff that got wired into you young and what it's doing to you now, the patterns you can't quite explain about yourself. Links in the description if you want to look. And to everyone watching and sharing this stuff, genuinely, thank you. If you want to go a step further, there's a Patreon too. Subscribers get early access to videos with no ads, and you help keep the channel running. That link's right there as well. QR codes on screen. Okay, back into it. Because we've covered the cage and the loneliness, but there's a third thing happening inside that 20-year house, and it might be the strangest one. The house has gotten bigger than you need, and somehow also gotten smaller than you can leave. Look at this. Empty nest boomers control about 28% of American homes with 3 or more bedrooms, roughly double the share owned by millennials who are actually raising kids in them right now. Gen X is heading into the same pattern. The kids left. The rooms didn't fill back up. There's a bedroom that's technically a guest room, but functionally a museum. Same comforter, same posters on the wall, a high school diploma somebody forgot to take. You walk past it every day for 10 years and don't think about it because that room is doing a job. It's holding a version of your life in place. Place attachment researchers have a word for this: territoriality. The home as a privacy container, a place where you control the symbolic objects of your own life. The guest room with the dust on the trophy. The garage with the tools your father gave you. The mug your daughter made in 7th grade that you still drink coffee out of. You can't sell the house because you can't pack the meaning. The objects move. The meaning doesn't. And then comes the next layer. The one that's actually new for Gen X. The house started filling back up. Not with your kids leaving, with your parents arriving. In 2025, 21% of Gen X home buyers bought a multi-generational home. 50% of Gen X caregivers are still raising kids while also caring for a parent. 56% are financially supporting parents, children, or both. The same 20-year house that was a 1990s starter home, then a 2000s family home, then a 2010s emptying nest, is now in some cases a 2020s multi-generational compound. Same address, 5 different lives lived inside it. You can see why moving feels insane. You wouldn't be moving a family, you'd be moving an archive, and this is where the loneliness story and the house story finally meet, and it gets sharp. Because the thing about being deeply rooted in a place is that it gives you an enormous amount of identity, stability, and almost no relational mobility. You know exactly who you are. You're just not entirely sure who else is in your life right now. The house remembers everyone. The house remembers the parties, the dinners, the night the basement flooded, the dog you had before this dog. The house has a fuller social life than you do, in a sense. The walls have hosted more people than you've talked to in person this month. And there's a thing that happens in your 50s where you start to confuse the memory of connection with the experience of connection. You think about your friends a lot. You remember things they said. You laugh alone at something one of them did in 2003. What you're doing is archive maintenance. Real friendship is the phone call you didn't want to make and made anyway. And the 20-year house weirdly makes that call harder because the house keeps reassuring you that everything's fine. Look around. The same couch, the same view, the same coffee. Everything is exactly where you left it. So nothing must be wrong. Except for the part where you haven't had a new friend in 11 years. Now, I want to give you the other side of this, because it would be dishonest to make the 20-year house sound like a trap. The research is also clear that deep rooting is associated with real, measurable goods. Lower stress in some studies, a stronger sense of meaning, higher reported life satisfaction in older adults who feel at home where they are. The house is doing something for you. It's the anchor that lets you be a person in a country that has spent the last 2 decades trying to dissolve every other anchor you had. Your job changed. Your industry changed. Your kids' lives went online. Your parents got old. The house held. Of course you love it. You should love it. The trick is just to notice what the house is actually doing and what it leaves alone. It stabilizes your identity. Your social life is on you. Those 2 things used to come bundled. In the 1970s, the same neighborhood that gave you the house also gave you a block, and the block came with people who knew you by face and saw you on Saturdays. That bundle broke somewhere around the time the garage door opener got good. You drive in, the door closes behind you, and the social half of the deal evaporates. You kept the structure, you lost the function. So if you're a Gen X man sitting in a house you've been in for 20 years, the question isn't whether to leave. The math says you're probably not leaving, and probably shouldn't. The lock-in is real. The place attachment is real. The multi-generational pressure is real. And your knees genuinely do know that staircase better than they'll ever know another one. The question is what you do inside the cage that you've chosen, that the system also chose for you. And what you do is you stop letting the house do all the social work, because the house can't make a phone call. The house can't text the guy you used to work with in 2009 and ask if he wants to get a beer. The house can't sign you up for the thing on Tuesday nights at the community center that you keep driving past. The house remembers your friendships. It does not maintain them. That part's on you. The Gen X man who's been in the same house for 20 years is the statistical outlier in a country that doesn't move anymore. And a piece of his identity is so braided into the floorboards that the question of leaving doesn't even compute. That's the warm part. The cold part is that the same forces that made the house feel like home also made the social circle around it stop growing. The house got more layered, the roster got thinner, and the rate lock turned the front door into a one-way valve. You're not going anywhere. Fine. Most people aren't. But the next 20 years inside the same address only work if you treat the walls as the floor of your life, the place you build up from. The address is set. The life is still open. There's still a lot of room to move inside a house you'll never sell. Actually, hold on. Before I sign off, give me one more minute, because I left something on the table and it matters. There's a piece of this we didn't quite finish. The capital gains exclusion on a primary home. The rule that lets you keep up to $250,000 in profit tax-free when you sell, $500,000 if you're married. That number was set in 1997. It hasn't moved in almost 30 years. Meanwhile, the house you bought for $200,000 in 2004 is worth $800,000 now in a lot of these markets. So even if you wanted to sell, even if you swallowed the rate jump, the IRS is sitting at the closing table with a bill that didn't exist for the generation before you. It didn't happen by accident. A policy quietly aged into a trap, and Gen X is the first generation walking face first into it at scale. Stack it all up. The rate lock, the tax rule frozen in the Clinton administration, the place identity, the frozen friend roster, the multi-generational pressure pushing in from both sides, the bedroom that's a museum. None of these things on their own would hold you in place. All of them together build a house you couldn't leave, even if a moving truck pulled up tomorrow. So when somebody asks why you've been in the same place for 20 years and you don't have a clean answer, that's why. The honest answer comes in about 12 pieces, braided together. One of them is love. One of them is math. The rest of them are quiet. You picked the house. The house picked you back. Now go do the part that the house can't. Quick thing before I go. Psychology of Gen X came out of doing this channel and realizing all these topics connect into one bigger story about how you got built. So to everyone who was able to get it, or anyone thinking of getting it, thank you for supporting the channel. Genuinely. If you're looking to get it for yourself, scan the QR code on screen right now. All right. The video on the screen. Give it a look. I think it's the right one for you.